Our topic for this evening, of course, is the budget, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Allison.
Thank you. Before Mr. Freeman gets started, I do want to make a few comments and remind everyone that our core business is focused on serving students, parents, supporting our staff, and developing our community's future workforce. Unfortunately, very little about the conversation we're going to be starting this evening is good for our students, our parents, or our community. Uncertainties will continue to permeate every aspect of our business. Our teachers and professional staff will continue to do their jobs well and focus on our students, but rest assured the uncertainty will make that focus difficult as we move forward. We've said from the beginning of our budget discussions this year that we must put everything on the table, and that's what we'll begin to do this evening. Finding efficiencies away from schools and classrooms has been important over the last decade or so. More than 88% of our resources are invested to directly support schools and classrooms. So now we have no choice but to look at where the vast majority of our dollars are focused. This is a starting point for a very difficult conversation that will unfold over the next several months. The board is in a terrible position as our school districts across the state because of the uncertainties surrounding state funding for education. Like every business, we have costs, and those costs tend to increase each year. This has not been reflected in the current block grant formula. These are not conversations we want to have. However, this is the reality of our business operation and decisions we must make in order to propose a balanced budget. Decisions yet to be made in Topeka may force us to look at our budget differently. Until the equity issue is decided upon, it's difficult to finalize our budget, and the uncertainty of state revenues and the potential for allotment cuts in May or June will continue to complicate decisions as we move forward. I want to remind that after our last board meeting where we talked about efficiencies and efforts and reductions we've made in the past, that this is not, unfortunately, the first time we've had to have these discussions at the board table. What's been good for kids is the careful assessment of operational expenditures to maximize our efficiencies. Numerous measures have been implemented over the last several years, including energy purchasing and savings measures, facility shutdowns, data-driven focus on work order management, closing inefficient schools, contract negotiations, technology, and go on as we think about the last board meeting. Again, our budget, 88%, is in operation and direct supports of our schools. Because of this, we're now very limited on where we can make cuts to balance the budget that will not have a direct impact on our students and our schools. Between 2008 and 2015, our certified staff has increased by 6.4%. At the same time, district administrators have decreased by 20.8%, and non-certified staff have increased by a whopping 0.5%. So when we have had resources, as it should have been, we've invested in the classroom. And as we've made our cuts, we've tried to cut as far away from the classroom. That's our goal. It's the right thing to do. But we're now reaching a point where there's not much left to take a look at that won't have a direct impact on our classrooms. It's important to know that as we work through this evening, no decisions have been made yet. None. This is the starting point for the discussion. This is a take-off aspect for the board as we move forward on how do we fill a $16 to $30 million budget hole next year. And as I said, the issues in Topeka ongoing today, nothing that was talked about would be a positive for our budget discussions moving forward. Elimination of Common Core, the equity issues, which would actually take operations funds in one proposal from the district and the extraordinary needs funds to redistribute is really take $10 here and put $11 into the other pocket. But this is what the beginning of our conversation is going to look like. We're still not ready through this budget to begin to make those types of decisions. We hope that as we walk through some of these suggestions tonight, questions we might answer for you, many of these were in the beginning stages of analysis, but that information you might need as we continue this dialogue that you'll please share with us so that we make sure that we have things outlined for you as you have to make these unfortunate and difficult decisions. Not only does this discussion become more difficult, particularly when we talk about that 88%, as we begin to talk about people, positions, and supports. I think that the last piece, before I turn it over to Mr. Freeman, that I would remind you, as we work through not only tonight and other budget discussions, we are at a point where the consequence portion of these discussions will be very important. Our building principals will be taking a look at the information we provide you this evening and providing feedback. But we're not at a point where these cuts can be made and responsibilities or support or program development shuffled someplace else. In many of these cases, when we eliminate the funding, we are eliminating or significantly reducing the services, the supports, and the programs. And that's why this may be as difficult a budget discussion as we've had over the last 6 or 7 years as we move forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Freeman.
Let me ask a question before you start. Just for guidelines, would you prefer that board members wait until after your complete presentation to ask questions? So as we go along?
Absolutely.
As we go along, okay.
And I think that just the format of this needs to be one of discussion, questions, answers. So anytime you have questions or whatever, please interrupt and get them answered. And the district staff that's sitting around the table too have been asked to also participate if so it's appropriate for that. So by all means, please ask questions.
As a board member, since I don't have a queue in place and I can't really look around the table to see who has a question, if you do so, just excuse me and direct them to Mr. Freeman. Thank you. I'll wave at him. Okay, thank you.
President Arnold, Superintendent Allison, members of the board. So this is preparing for this meeting is probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. We're in a, as Mr. Allison said, we're in a situation that there's not going to be any good decisions that come out of this. But we have to make the best decisions when we think about the consequences for the students. So what I'm going to present to you is really actually four sections to this. I did put a couple of things on here on the revenue side, which I'll show you, and then non-personnel reductions, personnel reductions, and then school closings. So, and again, as we go through this, please don't hesitate to ask questions as we go. I did decide that we needed to put a couple of revenue items on the board on the list. We hadn't really talked about them. I've mentioned that my desire not to use contingency reserve, but it is there. If we use contingency reserve to help with on the revenue side, that is a decision that's out there. And again, we currently have $10 million in our contingency reserve fund. The other thing that took place with the block grant is that the state aid that goes into capital outlay fund does not have to go into the capital outlay fund. We could leave it in the general fund and use it for general operating expenditures as well. And that'll range between $4 and $5 million probably. So those two revenue pieces are also out there for options to consider. Yes, ma'am.
That $4 or $5 million is not new money; it's money that we're already spending on something else. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So it would have to be a cut in order to move it to
yes.
need. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll move into the non-personnel reduction options, and what's up on the screen should be the exact same text that you have in the spreadsheet that you have. So I've just used that to help keep me on target here. The first one is a 10% reduction in non-FTE account lines. We actually did this last year as well. You will recall we made a 10% reduction to the building budgets and all the program budgets in account lines that did not contain FTEs. Now there are some salaries in here, some substitutes and supplementals and those types of things, but this is not non-FTE budgets. There are some funds that are exempt from this. Nutrition services, Latchkey, summer school, our reserve funds, our bond and interest, our textbook fund, and our activity fund, because they get their funding from someplace else. The buildings and the programs have actually been asked to produce 2 budgets for me, a 100% budget and a 90% budget. So until we get direction from the board on what decision we're going to do there, they're working on 2 budgets. They are also going to be providing me with information about what that 90% budget, what we will not be doing because of that other 10% reduction. So I'll have some data in another week or so when it comes around to what those cuts might look like as well. Yes?
Mr. Freeman, is this the same budget that we cut last year for this fiscal year? And
Yes.
how much did we cut it?
We cut it 10% last year as well. And last year, that entire budget was about $65 million. So we gained about $6.5 million. But we've taken that away, so now we're down to about $50 million there. So a 10% cut is only about $5 million in this one. Other questions? Number 2, transportation. Transportation is kind of an interesting animal. And for those of you that don't know, we pay for the number of buses that we run we run 3 tiers, 7, 8, and 9. So whichever one of those tiers has the most number of buses, that's what we pay for that day. And currently we run 465 buses at the 8 a.m. tier. So the efforts to reduce our transportation contract will focus on reducing the number of buses at that 8 a.m. tier. And we have a number of things that we are looking at, and it will wind up being a combination, I'm sure. We've talked in the past about the hazardous routes that are out there that really aren't hazardous anymore, that we'll take a look at those. We'll look at start times at a number of our locations, and it'll be a combination of those things so we can get that 465 down. Every bus we remove off of that tier 2 is a savings to our budget. So that will be the efforts in that regard. Yes?
For clarity, we're reimbursed what percentage on transportation?
Oh, it's about 50%.
50%?
And, well, with the block grant, we're really not, but
Okay.
yeah, in the past.
Ordinarily,
Yeah.
it would have been 50%.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much of the transportation budget is special ed?
It's about almost half and half when you look at the 2 of them together. And on the special ed side, we get supposed to get 80% reimbursement on the transportation, but we haven't been getting quite all of that. So we claim that special ed transportation in May, and it becomes part of our state aid in special ed.
And I think I've asked this question before because we've talked about these topics for cuts. I've been here long enough now that we've talked about several different years. What is our requirement on, if we charge parents for busing, can we do that? And if we do, what could that possibly bring? And then also in conjunction with our free and reduced numbers, like we do with textbooks, many times we wouldn't collect it anyway.
We can charge if we are transporting students inside the 2.5 miles. Those are the only students that we can charge for. Anybody that would qualify for state funding 2.5 miles and further away from school, we would not be able to charge for.
And how many under 2.5 miles do we transport?
I'm not sure that we do. Is Fabian under 2.5 miles? Okay. We'll pull that number. I don't think it's very many, but we'll get that.
I was thinking we didn't have a lot.
Yeah, it's predominantly been under 2.5 miles to be those qualified for hazardous substances.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Yes.
Just about the hazardous routes. We are in the process of analyzing all those hazardous routes to see that they are still hazardous.
Yes.
And we'll get that information later.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are we required to provide transportation for hazardous children?
Well, if they're over 2.5 miles, yes. If they're under 2.5 miles, technically no.
But we're waiting on Fabian, but most of our under 2.5 is
Are going to be hazardous.
right. Okay.
Are going to be hazardous routes.
I guess another question I have is how much of our transportation also affects our diversity and busing to schools where we want to change the numbers of African American and Caucasian students?
Well, that's going to be where the magnet program comes into play. And we've got magnet transportation on the list to analyze, but it's one of those trade-offs that I'm not sure that we want to make. But we are looking at
that could be one of the unintended consequences if we cut something on busing, if it affects us with the Department of Justice and
yes, absolutely.
Something we have to analyze in those recommendations.
And part of it too comes back again to the way our transportation contract is. We're paying for the bus for the day, so if we travel less, we save some on fuels, but we're still paying for the bus. So it may not be as big of a savings as you might think it would be. Questions? Other? Okay. Third one. Reductions to athletics and fine arts extracurricular programs. This is one that comes up a lot, and in some of our discussions. And we've approached this, I've approached this from the standpoint of the supplemental contracts that we pay in these two areas. Because our activity funds, where our gate receipts are, pay for a good deal of the operating side of the athletic and fine arts program, but the pay to the coaches and the sponsors come through the supplementals. The district currently uses about 3,300 supplemental contract worth about $7.5 million. And as you can see there, only 383 of those and 89 are in these two particular areas. And it's one of those where we've asked the principals for consequences, student consequences, if we make these kind of cuts, what does it really mean to the students there? So, questions?
And really, I think as we make changes to this, if you look at that one, the very last piece, 3,700 supplementals are for other types outside of the athletics and the extracurricular. And it would probably be more clear if we separate those, because you see the larger dollars are actually in those other supplementals.
And those other supplementals would be lunch duty, bus duty, those kinds of things? Is that what you're talking about?
Department heads, those
So they're not connected at all with the fine arts or the athletic?
No.
So Jim, when you're looking at this, number 3, is it inclusive? Pretty much if you start with one, you're going to go ahead and fan it out and do what was talked about? Or you're looking at me like you don't understand. You don't understand what I'm asking. Play like we keep athletic supplementals. And because this will be a huge conversation,
right.
We all know that. And it'll also go to, it'll be a public conversation that they'll be having over their tea and coffee and kinds of things, which it would be a good thing to have people interested enough to be concerned about it, and that they would pick up the phone and call their legislator or whoever about the kinds of things that we're having to probably subtract from kids. That's what we're really doing. And thank you for your work on this, too.
And one thing, too, and as we've looked at these, and it says reductions to, it doesn't say elimination of.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as we look at this and consider this, there'll be a district plan for how what this might look like. So we'll try to be consistent across the district, and if we get to the point where we have to implement this.
Give you an example of some of those other supplementals beyond athletics and fine arts. Lunchroom monitor, teacher teaching a 7th hour class, bus monitor, department chair, school improvement team, hallway supervision, school supervisor, teacher in charge, safety patrol sponsor, detention room monitor, those types of duties that are necessary to make the building be able to operate. And then do have the information regarding the 2.5 here. Let me pull that up real quick. 3,100 students receive hazardous transportation under 2.5 miles. And we have about 1,000 students that receive space available transportation under 2.5 miles. So what that means is after we get the year started, if we have along that route a student that may not qualify, maybe they're at the 2-mile mark, if we have open seats, then we would transport that student. And we're not going to be receiving reimbursement for those students, but it's just an additional stop. So we've got about 1,000 students on particular runs that we can do that. Is that accurate, Mr.
That's
Music?
correct, sir.
Okay.
Just one more question on supplementals, and this is probably to the superintendent. Have we developed that list? I know you have it, and given it to the building principals and had them do some kind of a loose rank ordering so that if we have to go into that, we would know what they value the most?
The principals will be having that conversation starting this week as they look at the budget and everything that's here. We did not preempt conversation with them other than make them aware just prior to the board meeting. So we have not asked them to do any of that detailed work. So we'll begin that after tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Besides this 1.2 million for athletics and 224 for the extracurricular, those are the only general fund numbers that we spend on athletics, is what you're saying. The rest comes out of gate receipts and pay to play. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If I recall correctly, the last time I saw numbers, most school districts spend about 2% of their general fund on athletics. We've never been that high, and this would be much lower than that as well.
So we're looking at between $7 and $8 million out of 436 million.
And that's with gate receipts.
So that's just the salary piece of it.
Oh, okay.
The gate receipts and that sort of that piece is not included in that 70 million.
Okay.
Any other questions? Number 4, reductions to addendum days. This is somewhat similar to supplementals, but addendum days are additional contract days for teachers where they perform some sort of a duty outside of the 180-day contract that they have, or 90 days contract, whatever. But this is for extra responsibilities that they are asked to complete either before the school session starts or after it's over. Currently have about 2,400 days in those contracts worth of almost $700,000.
Jim,
Yes.
is the number you had of 2,415.5 days, is that accurate from this past summer?
That is the projection for this fiscal year.
Okay.
And I say projection because some of them haven't been worked yet. So these are the number that we have on the books right now that are to be paid in this fiscal year.
Thank you.
Yes.
This isn't anything that affects our negotiated agreement, correct? I mean, this is over and above what's in the contract for teachers.
Correct. This is additional. This is just like the supplementals in that way. It's additional pay, and there is no written guarantee in the contract about these.
So it's year to year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Could you tell us some more about what kinds of work is done during addendum days?
Maybe one good example is counselors, and some of you others could jump in here on this if you would like to, but counselors before school are involved with enrollment and after school with schedules and that sort of thing. Librarians are generally taking care of library inventory and those types of things both before and after the school year begins. We do have some instructional technology people that work in the summer doing professional development. Did I get close there? Okay. Number five is restrict out-of-district travel. Is paid from non-grant funds. And again, this is one of those that we get criticized sometimes, thinking that we spend huge amounts of money on travel. And we travel quite a bit with our title funds and our magnet school grant funds. Those are separate. That travel is written into that grant. That's how the money is to be spent. This travel is for conferences and training that we send staff to outside of the district. It could be out of state, but it also could just be in state, but outside of the district. Case in point, we send staff to KSDE trainings on occasion in Topeka and other locations, and we pay for that travel and the lodgings and that sort of thing. So last year we spent a little over $600,000 in this particular area. And so we could restrict some of that, but we're still going to have to do some travel.
Okay, a question on that. On the travel, is it paid per car, or do they carpool? And we have several that are attending a certain conference. I mean, are there some savings that we're already doing in that area?
Well, we have district vehicles that people sometimes take. We also, yes, do carpool a lot, take one vehicle and multiple people and that sort of thing. So we try and minimize that as much as possible.
And I was asking that because it really frames the point that we've already done as many efficiencies as we can in that area, and so now we're just looking at cutting travel as the only option that's left.
Out-of-state travel also goes through several approval steps. So if, let's say there's out-of-state travel for the magnet grant, Dr. Burkhalter will submit that request, and eventually I would have to approve all out-of-state travel. If it's a high school, it will come through Mr. Faflick first, and then upon his approval again. So we've tried to make sure we have checks in place to ask those particular questions. When I see three folks going to the same location and out of state, I mean they're going to Kansas City for an autism training, and that gives us the ability to look at those things and see if we can get better efficiencies and deals when it comes to travel, hotel arrangements, those types of things.
Okay. Number six is eliminate the SROs at high schools. And last year we paid a little over $425,000. I think this year the contract's a little bit higher than that. This is one that, again, we have to think about what the consequences are for that. We could not operate the high schools without some other security there, so we'd be trading an SRO for some other security staff along the way, plus all the other issues that would go with that. Yes.
So do we not have, even in the buildings where we have SROs, do we not have security staff there as well? And so I guess I'm trying to see how you're looking at this, because if we currently have security in those buildings, in addition to SROs, then you're saying increase the number of individuals that we would have for security?
I'm going to pass the buck to Mr. Faflick.
The SROs work with the building security officers as a team, and each of those team members has a role to play, and if you remove the SRO from that equation, they'd have to be replaced in order to maintain that safe environment that we need for our kids. So it's a number of bodies as well as the function of those bodies. So if we have 3 people, 2 BOE officers and an SRO, that SRO leaves the team shorthanded.
It would also necessitate our buildings calling 911 on a frequent basis. Those aspects where the SRO is there and kind of provides that continuity to what would be required. If you eliminate that position in the building, we'll be calling 911 on a more frequent basis.
But we will get a figure on what we would have to increase at a later date.
Yeah, we'll develop that one some more. We'll look at the cost of adding security staff in the buildings and what the coverage is going to have to be for that. And that's some of the information we'll get from the building principals. Okay. Number 7 is to reduce substitute teacher usage by limiting the teacher pull-out for district and building level professional development. And this is one where we're struggling a little bit to get the exact numbers here, but this is time. This is actually probably the most efficient way for us to actually provide professional development. Is to pull teachers out of the classroom, put a sub in there, and get them all together to have the professional development all at one time. Because the cost of doing it off contract time on a per day basis or a per hour basis would be more than what we pay on the sub. But you have to weigh that against having a substitute in the classroom as well. So.
This would be one of those. This is there are pros and cons to both sides. If you decided not to do any pull-out, there's the advantage of having the regular classroom teacher in the classroom. Our ability to provide that professional development becomes very limited. We would not provide the same quantity because we would be paying contractual hourly rate or daily rate. What we have in a budget, particularly if we would have to cut that budget under this, would mean there's just a great deal of PD that wouldn't occur. We just wouldn't be able to provide it because it would be cost prohibitive.
And we'll develop this one a little bit more too to try and we can see if we can nail down the number a little bit better on that one. The next one, number 8. The next several of these have to do with utility usage, and this is the first one here is as of April. Actually, it's going to be the 18th, not the 1st. As of April the 18th, we're going to establish some set points in our buildings of 70 degrees during the heating season and 76 during the cooling season. One of the reasons for April 18th is we are then into the cooling season. So the set points in our buildings will all be set at 76 degrees to see if we can garner some savings through managing those set points a little bit closer. So we'll have some rough data by the time we get to the end of the fiscal year of the dollar amount savings that we might have in regard to this particular move.
I guess I'm having a problem just looking at this because, as an example, in the cooling season, and you're setting it at 76 degrees, which, depending on the number of people, 76 might be comfortable, but if you are setting it at 76 and your actual temperature increases to 83, 84 because of the number of people in the building, I guess I'm not seeing
At 76, what will happen is the temperature goes up, it cooled down to that 76 point is what we're looking at.
Okay, so we would keep it at 76.
That's the goal, would be to keep it at 76 by establishing those points, and that's been the goal through part of the energy management. These are the target degrees that we've set, but there's been greater latitude on adjusting those temperatures. So our energy managers feel that if we are locked into those through the central monitoring aspects a little more tightly, we would see this additional savings. Now, again, if you've got an evening activity, there's something special in the auditorium gym, just like we have now with overrides and requests, we would continue to do that.
Okay, so you could have that option in there built in. Okay.
And it will also give us an idea that we can measure exactly what you're talking about. The temperatures in the buildings, how that's working, a degree variation. Say we were to go to 77 degrees. Would be another 150 to 200,000. That's because we have so many buildings, so many square foot, that a degree either way, gives us additional savings. But then we get to a point on what's comfortable, what creates an environment that education can occur, and you're not worried about it being too cold or too hot.
Yeah. Now this is kind of an aside, but how many of our buildings actually are energy efficient with windows and all of that? I mean, I know we started it.
Probably a third, maybe. Third to close to a half, maybe. We'd replace some windows and bonds, self-done bond additions, obviously, but the older parts of the buildings, the 50s additions, are lacking.
You're going to have to roll back several years when the state cut the capital equalization, and we looked at changing the millage. That was one of the consequences we knew that would occur, where the goal was within about a 7-year time period we'd be able to change out those windows and fascia and do those types of, and we knew now that it would probably double that time period, just because of the amount of dollars we could allocate toward that would be significantly less.
Okay.
Joy, I think you had a question.
My question was just, what is the current set point for, I know there's some latitude, but what is generally the current set point for classrooms?
Well, these are the set points that we have targeted, but we've made so many exceptions to that that we're going to go back and make sure that everything is set at the correct spots.
Give or take a couple degrees either way.
Yeah.
That's not a great savings.
Okay. The next one, again, decrease utility usage by eliminating non-essential personal equipment and appliances such as mini refrigerators, microwaves, coffee pots, etc. And I know we've been down this path once before, but I think it's time we probably look at this again to see if we can look for ways to save some funds on the utility side, and by defining the policy and what is meant by non-essential, there are places where we do need these appliances and that sort of thing. So we'll try and figure out a way to make that happen, and then perhaps see if we can eliminate that and save some of the utility costs that go along with those.
So this proposal then would be more like these items you would use in a central break room and not just have them in your classroom. It wouldn't eliminate them from the buildings.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And can we tell the usage on microwaves goes up at certain times, or how do we know that that's a concern or an issue?
Our energy managers can tell you specifically when lunchtime starts at each of the levels because of the incredible spike we see in usage. So when elementary lunch periods hit, they see our usage double, triple during that time period. So we can definitely see how this impacts our overall usage. Yes.
Jim, is this talking individual person?
Yes.
Like there's 4 third grade teachers, and every third grade teacher has a microwave and a mini refrigerator.
Yes.
That we're really talking more individual at this time on this item.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And we bring our thermos for coffee.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we won't be able to stay.
We don't want to get rid of coffee.
Okay. Number 10. Another utility usage, and all of our systems right now automatically, the temperature thermostat set points automatically change at certain times and drop back to a nighttime setback. And what we are suggesting is moving those times earlier to 7:30 for elementary and middle school and 9:30 for the high school. And at these times, it would drop back to a different set point and essentially shut the HVA systems down and keep it at a lower or a higher temperature depending on what season it is. And again, if there were events in the buildings that required it to keep the HVAC system on later than that, we would deal with those through exceptions or through the contracts. But other than that, they would automatically change the temperature settings at those particular times. Number 11, and I know that you looked at this before, the 4-day work week year-round. We've had a number of suggestions that we take a look at this again. And so we're going to dust off the old research from about 4 or 5 years ago when this was looked at again and see if anything has changed with regard to that discussion. So you'll get more information on this. But in essence, instead of going Monday through Friday to school, you'd go Tuesday through Friday to school for a longer period, longer day. There are some school districts that do this. And they like it, and it does save them some money, but they are typically much smaller school districts in much smaller communities, not nearly as large or as diverse as we are.
Looking at those that say that they've actually had some savings from doing this, it comes in predominantly 3 areas: a little energy, nutrition services. We do not. Our nutrition services does not receive any general fund. So any reduction in nutrition services won't help our budget on this aspect, and in transportation. But in most of those cases, in looking at this and talking to some of those 4-day weeks, the school district is hiring the bus drivers and running the fleet. So that's where they see some savings. So we'll go back and reanalyze this and look at the numbers and see if there's maybe something different we need to look at as we think of the cost factors and bring that information back to you.
Yes, Mike.
If we were to implement something like this, a 4-day week, on the 5th day, would we shut the schools down completely where no personnel would go in because they would come in and be adjusting the thermostats and cooling the whole building for just a small amount, or how would there be something like that?
Well, again, that probably would have to be developed. One of the things that we would look at is, do we want to use that 5th day as our professional development day? But I think I think it would depend on the schedule and those types of things. But ideally, if we can shut the buildings down, we save more money, obviously. So that would be part of the intent. Yes.
If we brought our staff in professional development on that day, we'd lose a lot of our savings, because our savings aren't necessarily just in utility and transportation. It'd be in paying teachers for less time.
Well, again, it comes back to how it would be developed and studied. There's many different ways that you could look at this, and if we still have a same teacher contract and the same number of days, then you've got to deal with that. So it would be tied up with negotiations in terms of the number of days and the length of those days and those sort of things. So there's a lot of detail and analysis that would have to go into this.
If we extend the days, we're extending the work time for our teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how we could get that 5th day as PD.
It would be more instead of where we are, not every 5th day, but say in the 9 PD days, we wouldn't cut any student contact days. So those we wouldn't need to do that. We'd do them on the Monday, or however it works. So you compress that a little bit, and that's how you can extend the day, but not extend it by huge amounts, and still do it within the start and end calendar that we traditionally look at, you can actually compress that potentially just a little. There's a lot of what ifs in this one that we'll work through and take a look.
That would eliminate the need for substitute teachers if you.
Potentially, I mean,
Yeah.
there's kind of a ripple on
What you would say.
on
Yeah.
what it would look like and how that might play out.
Yeah.
As Mr. Freeman said, you look across the country and you see predominantly they're smaller school districts. At this point in time, through our research, we would be the largest school district to attempt that. But we'll pull it together and take a look at it and see whether it would make economic sense. And then the other side of this coin is to talk about the instructional aspects of it and what implication that has. It was pointed out to me in discussion a little bit earlier that that could make state testing interesting because you've now collapsed the number of days to work students through. So there are just a lot of those things we would really have to think about. We'll run the bigger picture numbers, what we think that might look like, and then if it merits further discussion and development, then we'll do that.
It would also have a very big impact on families and
Yes, it
child
would.
care and things like that. So I think that would be another big concern.
Which is a good point. If part of our savings is around energy, that means there's no latchkey that we would provide on that Monday. If the building's closed, the building's closed. If we provide the latchkey, we've just basically eliminated part of that energy savings and custodial and some of those others. So those are the things we'll kind of pull apart and bring back to you.
Yes, Mike?
Can we go backwards just a little bit? I just had a question on energy savings. How many groups do we have coming in at night that are non-district usage? Do we have that?
I don't have that data with me right now, but yes, we do. Yeah, we have the data on all that usage. Yeah.
Do we get substantial income from that, or do we break even with?
Many of the groups that come in after hours, we don't change the HVAC or anything, so it's a little bit of some lights that's involved with it. And depending on what group it is and that sort of thing, there are some fees that we recoup some of that with. But we'll pull some data together on that as well. The last one in this section is to look at restricting enrollment of out-of-district students. We currently have 987 out-of-district students enrolled. And I would indicate to you that the block grant, when they implemented that and they took away the count feature for enrollment and funding, they required that we keep enrolled any students that we had enrolled out of district. So prior to the block grant, if they were an out-of-district student enrolled in our schools, we had to admit them under the block grant and their siblings. So if we had a fourth grader that was an out-of-district student before the block grant, and the block grant now, and he's a fifth grader, and he or she has a sibling that's a kindergartner, we have to admit that student as well. And we do have some breakdown on some other how this lays out with with the children of our staff members and that sort of thing. But with the block grant the way it is right now, we don't gain very much by saying no out-of-district students because we're going to have these 987 plus some anyway. I will say that this year when we started enrolling, we did start turning away students that weren't didn't have a sibling and were not a child of an employee. So we have turned away some out-of-district students already. Okay. The next section is program and personnel reductions, and I'll comment about the numbers. Yeah. Notice that we just jumped from 12 to 21, and that's my thing. So yes, I can count. I know that 13 comes after 12, but I expect that we will add to this list. So my effort to try and keep things categorized and ready so that I can do sorting and that sort of thing. So I left some room on the non-personnel side to add some of those numbers. And then you'll notice that there's another skip when we get down to the school closings. So anything up to the 20s is non-personnel. 20 through the 40s is going to be personnel, and 50 and above is going to be school closings or other things. So that was my rationale behind that. So if I confused everybody, I apologize. But I like to sort things numerically sometimes, so that's why I did it. Number 21 is to outsource our custodial department. And we currently have 298 FTE in our custodial department, and that is everyone that's in the custodial department. Custodians in the buildings, all the head custodians, the building engineers, the people we have at SSC, that's the whole pot. And the option that we're looking at is to work with a third-party contractor to provide those services. And it would be expected that our current employees would be hired by that contractor to continue providing the services in our buildings. We're currently working on some estimates on the savings with regard to this, but we are being told by a potential contractor that we could see probably some 10% or higher savings. This budget is between $14 and $15 million in our budget.
Jim, would this require, or would this potentially mean fewer custodians in a building? Or would we hold the company to a certain standard and then they would choose to provide the number of custodians, or how would that work? Have we talked about that?
We haven't worked through the detail yet, but essentially we told them that we wanted them to give us some numbers based on all the staff that we have right now, all of the custodians that we have in the buildings right now. And actually, my guess is that we'd probably see a few more custodians than what we currently have on staff. But right now, it would be staffed at the same level that we currently are.
There's a quality of service that's established, expectations around frequency, those types of things that's developed in the contract. So the idea that we would expect a certain level of cleaning done nightly, every other night, those types, you establish those parameters, and then it would be their responsibility to provide the staffing to ensure that gets done. And then there are reviews, checks to make sure that's occurring. So it's, for many of them, they find that they can be as efficient or more efficient based on the equipment they may use, the level of training. So what we would do is really work through what would be that expectation, and then their price factor is based on that.
I guess
that makes sense.
My question would be how they expect to get a savings of 10% or more. That's either fewer people, lower salaries, fewer benefits. What I've seen on the state level with privatization has not gone as well as it could. So that would be a concern I'd really want to look at. So thank you.
And actually, he just picked up my question, because I was wondering where their piece of the pie would come from, if it would be cutting the salary of the individuals, because a third party has got to get some money from somewhere, and so that's a great concern. And if they cut the compensation paid to these individuals, and then the turnover is so great, which people are trying to make a living, then I'm wondering, bringing in new individuals, the cost of the background. I assume we would be doing background checks. It would be a lot of other additional things that seems like it would erode that 10% pretty quickly.
Their cost savings typically comes through their cost for workers' comp. Salary is one of those factors that we have to detail for them. Benefits packages is of course something. The higher level of benefits package, they, if they tried to offer something that was absolutely identical to what we offer now, then savings could be reduced. Chemicals, because of the scale of which they do that, many times produce their own. They see the savings there when they're providing that. There's just a number of variances that, again, when we look at that scale of service and expectations, they said then that slides the difference between your potential savings. So there's still quite a bit more of research that needs to be done here. Talking with the Council of Great City Schools, of those districts that have gone this direction, they do see cost savings, but again, it varies depending on what parameters were put in place at the beginning.
So we could have requirements of them, a thorough background check, since they would be around our students.
Same thing we require with all of our
that would be in place.
all of our folks in our building. All those things would be in place. So we just established these aspects and then see is there a savings or is there not?
Okay, fair enough.
So would this work similar to our outsourcing of the bus system with First Student, where there would be a bid for a contract, and then with First Student we have some of these kinds of requirements, right? Background checks and all of that. So is this a similar kind of suggestion? And I wasn't around, but did we outsource to First Student many years ago? Has that generally gone smoothly? Could someone speak to that process?
We had another company.
We are in year 6, I believe, with First Student, and that was after a 14-year period of time that we were with
Durham School Services. There's no one employed in the district that remembers when transportation was managed in-house. At least we haven't been able to find that person yet that remembers. But we did solicit competitive proposals for that service, and we did identify some parameters and expectations of services that we would that were built into that final contract.
And then my other question is, I think I heard Superintendent Allison say this, but maybe I want to clarify. Did you say that then, because of whoever this company might be that would be interested in this, there may be a national company or statewide company, so they buy chemicals and supplies on a more massive scale than we do, so they're able to get better?
Correct. Given our size, number of buildings, square footage, there's probably 3 to 5 companies that do this on a national basis that would have the capacity. We're large enough; it would be difficult for somebody without that capacity. But yes, traditionally because they're buying on scale across the country, they find savings there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen with the equipment?
There are a number of ways companies will handle that. In some cases, it used to be traditionally they would assess the equipment and make an offer to purchase. I think what is more the trend now, it appears that that's part of their bid, is they're going to provide the equipment because they want consistent equipment across the district. That's what they've trained folks on. Again, because they can purchase in large scale. If you're looking at, this particular floor buffer and you're buying 100 for our district, that's one thing. If you're buying 5,000 of them for their clients across the country, they can do that. So it's one of those parameters that you make a decision and analyze. But that seems to be where the trend is leaning at this point in time.
Okay.
Number 22, option to eliminate all-day kindergarten. This would return us to half-day kindergarten at all sites and would reduce the teaching staff by 105 FTE, which is worth about $6.5 million. I would indicate to you, though, that and all of these numbers on salaries and that are in here, the savings would probably not reach that level just because of the way the RIF policy would work and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to have you have an idea of what's in the budget right now for some of these positions. We have talked about the idea of having pay for the other half of day, but probably would not work very well for Wichita Public Schools because of the high number of free and reduced students that would not be able to pay and would probably have some sort of a waiver with regard to that. So the savings would be minimized and then it becomes much more difficult. So, but this is an option.
I probably could say this on all of these different items, but this is one that just literally breaks my heart.
Mm-hmm.
We have worked so hard to put these kinds of services in, and we know what it means, at the preschool level and the kindergarten to third grade level. We should all be ashamed as a state. So I'll just leave it at that.
I think that I remember in the days when we had all-day kindergarten in our title schools and the other schools wanted it. And I also remember hearing the great strides that the kids made in their education during that kindergarten year. And I see this suggestion as a real hurt to kids and their future in education and the kinds of things, because if they get that kindergarten year under control, they're ready to go in first grade. And giving them the other problem too is that I remember teachers would talk about was nap time at home, or parents thought it was in the afternoon their kids would come to school and they came at the wrong time. Obviously I'm not in favor of this at all. There's got to be, the people in Topeka ought to be ashamed of not giving this to kids.
Yes, and I think it's important to remind everyone that what we're funded for is half day. So that's where the savings comes here, because this board years ago made a decision to provide all day K, but that other half comes from our general fund expenses, or what used to be was a lion's share of our at-risk funding, but under the block grant, it's going to be part of the general fund, and we only receive the equivalent of a 0.5 per child.
I think this is just more of a comment, and some of my colleagues have made comments, but to me it seems that eliminating all-day kindergarten is really shooting ourselves in the foot. We're really creating, in that scenario, given our students and where they are when they start with us, taking that action would cause us to be behind, and then our students would have trouble catching up. So to me, that would be, as a board member, the final thing I would want to put on this list. So I know there's a lot of things we could say that about, but this is one where that action causes us to take steps backward for the rest of their education career. And I think that's something that needs to be said too.
Well, the next one's almost as much fun. Eliminate the non-special education pre-K program. And let me explain a little bit by what I mean here is that our special education program is required to provide a pre-K program for special ed students. And we expand that out. Used to be, it's now under the block grant, some grant funds where we expanded that out quite a bit. And so we currently have 27.5 FTE assigned to the pre-K program that are not special ed teachers. We have quite a few special ed teachers in that program. And the non-special ed portion of this budget is about $4.2 million. But we would not eliminate the complete program because we'd have to keep the special ed portion of it in place. Yes.
And those special ed students that are in a lot of our buildings, it's not just in a certain place. They're out in our buildings with the pre-K kids, correct?
Correct, yes.
And in some cases, again, by law, we have matching students in the room that may not necessarily be special ed identified. Is that
correct?
Also?
Yes, correct, yes.
Okay. And again, we're taking a giant step backwards, just like with kindergarten, the minute we start attacking our pre-K programs, because none of the children in those programs are there just for babysitting. They're all there because they need it to be able to stay and move up with their peers. So none of this is fun.
Jim?
Yes.
Special ed raises a question to me because it's not part of our budget that we're talking about. But if we go to like a 4-day work week, would we still have to maintain a 5-day special ed schedule?
I don't. It's just a matter of providing the services. Neil, you want to step in on that one?
We're required to provide FAPE, which would be a free appropriate public education. So our students, if a school year was defined as so many hours, then if we lengthened our day and went 4 days, we're still providing FAPE within that context of what we define as a school. You'd have some extended school year for a student who might need to go longer than that, but for what the school year is defined, if we provide that in that parameter, then we're fine.
Okay. Well, I was just worried because if we go to a 4-day and we had to have a 5-day, keeping our buildings open and keeping staff for that. I mean, if we can go to a 4-day, then it makes sense. That might make sense to do if we needed to do that. I just want to make sure we were clear on that because that would be a gray area to me. Thank you.
Number 24, restructure and reduce the curriculum and instruction department. Currently have 37.4 FTE assigned into this program. Notice we do not have eliminate here because there are functions in this department that must be done. So we would not be able to eliminate all of this program. But it would certainly, talk about taking a step backwards in terms of maintaining the development and the movement ahead that we've had in those particular areas. But this is, again, one of those areas that we do have an option with.
Where we restructured and cut a number of these positions a couple of years ago. What did we do at that point? Do you remember, John? How many positions we cut?
Suzanne, do you remember how many?
Since 2008, my department's been cut by 54%.
54%. And if I recall correctly, when we did that the last time, I heard probably more comments from teachers that work that was now, kind of pushed back onto them, things that were required that they had to do. That would do more of that, here as well.
Correct.
And I believe some of our suburban districts, many of the teachers do their own curriculum development and things as well, so that adds to their workload and everything as well. So again, that'd be one of the consequences we'd have to look at for that. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Number 25 is to eliminate the instructional coach positions. This is one that we've heard comment about over the last several weeks. Excuse me. We currently have about 61 FTE in this program, but I would point out that with the exception of a couple of those FTE, they're all funded out of Title 1A and Title 2A. And so if we eliminated the instructional coach positions, we haven't gained anything on the general fund side. We haven't saved any money. That title money would then have to be used in a different fashion within that. And the Title IIA money is all professional development money. So it would have to be used in that regard. I think the bulk of it is 2A money. This is one that gets talked about, and we wanted to present it, but understand that we don't gain any general fund savings out of eliminating the instructional coach positions. Number 26, eliminate the data leader positions. These are primarily at the middle school and high school level, currently 26.3 FTE. And these are positions that assist the building team with analyzing their data and helping them determine what their curriculum needs are and what their instructional strategies need to be. This would also be one that that's probably work that's going to have to be done in some fashion. So it will change the workload probably of everybody in those buildings, teachers and administrators. Number 27, eliminate the athletic coordinator positions. Currently have 6.5. These are at the comprehensive high schools, and these are positions that handle and manage all of the athletic and activities at all of the high schools. This is not work that would go away. So once again, we can reduce these positions. We wind up, somebody else is going to have to pick up the load, probably spread between other administrators and other coaches, that type of thing. Am I correct there, Mr. Faflick?
When I joined the board, I believe these were half-time positions in all of our buildings, and then we made an effort to encourage our kids to be much more involved in their high schools with activities, clubs, and whatnot. And that was part of this position, if I recall correctly. They spend a lot of time, doing that as well as the athletic, functions and things of that nature, if I'm not mistaken. So,
initially they were athletic leaders and dealt only with the scholastic sports program. Since then, they've become activities directors and deal with supporting clubs and other activities in the buildings, cheers, dance, as well as primarily athletics.
Jim, you're doing such a great job, so encouragement. It's making my root canal that I had today this morning as the highlight of my day for all these things. So we just keep getting better and better.
Better and better. Number 28, assessment leaders and facilitators. Again, at the comprehensive high schools, these are the people that are out there helping with all the state assessments, and they're very busy right now. And again, work that is being done that would have to continue to be done by someone in that building. Yes?
I know that they do a lot of work with our assessments this time of year, but what are their duties in the other parts of the year? Do you know that?
There are not just state assessments that they coordinate. All of our other formative assessments, our Ames Web, all of that needs to be scheduled, and there's just other work that happens all year long with assessments.
And these people are only at the high school level?
Yes, only at the high school.
Number 29. Eliminate the counseling positions paid from non-grant and non-special education funds. And we currently have 115 FTE in these positions, but they're funded in a couple of different ways, and I know special ed funds quite a number of these positions. I don't have that data here, but Neil, do you remember how many?
Title I buildings would have an option if they wanted to purchase additional counseling time. So that varies from year to year on how much Title I would pay.
Number 30, eliminate career counselor positions. These are actually not certified positions. These are on our KZ pay schedule. 7 people that work with students in the career and tech ed department in terms of their career counseling. And these are positions that are highly valued by our students.
Okay. I believe, wasn't this recently where the WEVA and other folks said we needed to have more?
Yeah, yes, and I'll be bringing back to you information here in a couple weeks. Our super SAC will be talking budget, and one of the questions I'll be asking them are what they have found to be the greatest value to them as they move through high school and look beyond. In the super SAC group, as we talked about that at our last meeting, this particular group of positions were at the very top of their list. So it'll be interesting to see if the larger group feels the same way. But we'll walk them through that process, and then that will also be another set of information I'll bring back to you so that you have input from our high school students as well.
Would we eliminate the office in each high school as well for these then, if we didn't have staff? Or would we ask someone else to pick up some of that, or
if
couldn't
I'm
be delivered in
understanding
the same way?
No, it wouldn't be delivered in the same way. You'd have to. Well, it depends on what you do in the previous one. If you eliminated the counselors overall, there'd be nobody to pick that up. So. Part of the reason that the students felt like this was such an effective position for them is because the counselors have so many other roles, whether it's through scheduling and groups and those types of things. And these folks were dedicated just toward career, college, scholarships, school visits, and that was their focus versus it being another one of a long list of duties. At least that was their, again, I'm not advocating at this point in time because everything's got to be discussed, but that was their feedback, and I just wanted you to be aware we'll get a broader perspective from 100 high school students here very shortly.
Number 31 is eliminate nurse positions. There are currently 84.9 positions that are, again, not funded by special education. This is one of those where we really couldn't completely eliminate the service, but we could certainly reduce it using different types of staff and that sort of thing. So, and there are a lot of services, nursing services currently being provided through special ed, but we're pretty well maxed out on what we can do on that side of it because it needs to be tied to an IEP. So we'd have to be filling in the gaps with some other types of personnel, perhaps.
Again, maybe my memory is showing, but when we talked about doing this before and we did reduce nurses and things at that time, if a child that was not a special ed student got hurt on a playground or wherever, they came into the nurse, and they weren't special ed, and we weren't paying that nurse with special ed, we still have to keep track of how the nurse uses her time or his time, and if it's not a special ed student, we have to use general funds for that as well. Is that correct?
First off, buildings can purchase what they want, so
we have some differences in whether you have a full-time nurse or not. So
right.
There may not be a nurse in the room when they come in there, but what we do is after they decide what they purchase, we look at the IEP needs of that building and say, how much time do we anticipate a nurse rendering services to meet the goals on IEP, and they log those hours, so they don't have to log the regular ed. They log the special.
But if we had a nurse at a building that was only paid with special ed, they really should not be dealing with any general ed students.
Right. What would happen there is if let's say we had a nurse that was there one full day, and they couldn't log that because they were doing other things, then when they had the audit, from special ed audit, they would just deduct. They'd take the log, and if it added up to, .2 less than that, they take that away. So
yeah. So we still would have a general ed or general budget cost.
Yeah, we would pay for it in the other end by deduction from the audit.
Okay.
And I would indicate, though, the way that works, we lose the special ed state aid under that audit, but we've still paid that person in the special ed fund, but the money just came from general fund transfer. Okay, so in essence, yeah, we've lost that funding, but we're still really paying them out of the Fund 30, even though we don't get the state aid to support it.
Okay.
Our thinking, and how much do we put into special ed out of the general fund? That just approximately.
Just that portion of it.
Yeah. How much do we supplement special ed out of our general ed fund?
Well, let me give you all the pieces here. We have about $110 million, $113 million budget. $43 million of that is aid through the state. We get about, I'm going to say, $20 to $22 million from the feds, and the rest is general fund money. So that's.
So the percentage that we supplement.
It's about 40%, 35 to 40%. I think.
By mandate, what is it supposed to be?
Well, the federal mandate is 92% of excess costs. Okay, and that's what we so. But sometimes how that gets calculated is a little tricky. But the last number I knew from Dale Dennis, we were running about 78 to 80% of excess costs coming from the state, and that's statewide. So
if we have 8,000 students, if under the base aid formula, 8,000 students is going to generate so much base aid.
Right.
So the state's going to look at, some of that money is going to pay for their special ed because they're generating that from the state. So that's where it gets complicated. Is you could figure out how much time the students in special ed. So that's how much state base aid FTEs produced by those students being. It gets.
But roughly around 50 million is our portion.
About 40 to 45 million.
40 to 45 million is what we're putting into
Yep.
special ed. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Mr. Freeman, you said something about if we eliminated nurse positions, we could use other kinds of personnel. I'm a little confused about what that means. Do you have you guys thought about what that looks like, or do you have some ideas now, or is that for later?
I can address that a little bit. We'll bring back more information later, but of course there are different levels. So you've got the BSN, the LPN. There's even a category of medicine or pharmacy. Basically, they're individuals that have had to be certified in first aid, and then they have an additional certification around dispensing of medications. So what they would be able to do is dispense medications and provide basic first aid type services, but they are not an LPN or an RN or some of those. So you kind of get this continuum in what they're allowed to do. And of course, the more they're capable of doing, the higher the cost. One of the factors in most schools, the level of what they're needing to provide on a daily basis is not going to be at that very top level. So that's kind of what we've started to look at is what are those abilities and requirements, and how does that mesh with what our buildings really need. So we'll bring that information back to you. Does that help clarify?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we weren't talking about asking the school secretary to...
PTA president now becomes the official...
Okay.
Just one comment on that. Something that I was very surprised about. A survey that was done across the state from superintendents talking about what cuts had been made. And I felt we were very fortunate in many cases because of what we were still providing our students. But, in key areas like librarians and nurses and some of those, particularly in the smaller school districts, those folks disappeared a couple of years ago. So it was interesting to see what that progression has been across the state. It doesn't make it any better, but I was just surprised at how prevalent that was for a lot of school districts.
And number 32, reduce the number of elementary librarian positions. Currently have 48.6 FTE, and this would also be one where we couldn't just eliminate. We would probably have to replace the librarians with a clerk in those buildings, and probably have some librarians available to supervise and manage some of the things that have to be done in a library. So that's why I didn't say eliminate, but we have to reduce the number. And the $3.4 million is the total salaries of those 48, so that wouldn't be the savings involved with this. Yes.
So some people think that library just means there's a bunch of books and you keep them in their stack and you check them in and out. But our librarians in elementary school serve kind of a bigger purpose from what I've seen. I wonder if someone, Mr. Allison or someone from your staff, might be able to talk about what elementary librarians do beyond that basic work.
Dr. Thompson?
The librarians provide literacy. That's what they work on. They don't just come in and get to check out books. They read. They teach children how to research. They do lots of things in the area of literacy. So that is would be a huge loss for us.
Number 33, reduce the number of peer consultant positions. We currently have 11 FTE in these positions. Our UTW contract requires a minimum of 4 peer consultants. But again, this is one that the peer consultants are funded through title again. So even if we reduce the 7 over the minimum of 4, it would not impact our general fund dollars. So again, this is one of those that gets talked about some as a potential place to reduce staff, but we don't gain anything on the general fund side if we do this. Number 34, this one really is just almost an example, I provided information here. If we were to reduce 1 teacher from every building, every regular education building in our district, or there are about 90, if we reduced 1 teacher out of every building, would save about $5.4 million if you figured you'd save the average teacher cost of $60,000. Chances are that you probably wouldn't save all of that because you'd probably be riffing the lowest paid teachers, which is more like $52,000. So, but just to give you an example of where the dollars are, but 90 teachers would generate about $5 million or thereabouts. Number 35 is to eliminate middle school team time. This would require the restructuring of the middle school class schedule, which potentially would result in a reduction of the number of teachers needed. But we're still working on the analysis for that, and if we were to expect some savings on that, it would mean some real restructure of the class structure of the classes that would be offered at the middle school level.
We'll have more information after the middle school principals have a chance to analyze this. It would also mean more than just the structure. It would be the major philosophical shift from middle school and parent contact and PD time that's done through team time and all those other components. So this is one that Mr. Faflick is meeting with middle school principals this week, and we'll be able to come back with you on a more detailed what this really entails and what it would mean.
Just a follow-up question. Could you talk a little bit more about what that middle school team time is and why we use that in our middle schools, what its purpose is?
Our teachers use that middle school team time literally to work in teams to support each and every student that is assigned to their respective group, to their respective team. They collaborate and share how they are supporting and best practices for supporting each and every student. So they have a lot of time to talk about Jake and Nate and Nick and Andy. They have a lot of time to talk about what is the best strategy moving forward, what progress are being made looking back, but also how are they going to move forward to identify those things. They get their professional development around the needs that are identified at that time. They do a lot of parent contacting as a team. They work in communication with families as a team. So it's a really a huge collaboration time for our middle school teachers to have.
So just for clarification, because I wasn't aware of this idea, but I think it's a good one, especially in middle school. Middle school teachers for the core classes have an assigned group of students that go between those teachers. So those teachers can say, in science, the student is struggling. Hey, he's struggling with the same thing in math. How can we work together to pull this student forward? Or, hey, there's a reading issue. So for that school year, those teachers help. So the student doesn't get lost in a middle school.
Absolutely. It's a huge transition piece. It's for academic needs as well as for behavioral needs. So it's a true MTSS model where we're meeting the needs of every student and helping them move forward and transition from elementary to the middle school setting, from the middle school setting, and preparing them for success at high school level.
Thank you.
Number 36, this is to reduce or eliminate the high school teacher duty assignments. Every high school is a little bit different in this regard, but there are teachers at the high school level that are given a duty assignment in lieu of teaching an actual class. And again, by eliminating the duty assignments, the teacher would be free to teach an additional class with the potential of being able to reduce staff. However, I would also indicate that the duties that those teachers are assigned still have to be done by somebody. But there may be some ways to restructure that, and I know Mr. Faflick is meeting with the high school principals, and we'll be starting to look at this as another potential. So we'll have more information on this one as it moves forward. Number 37 is reduce or eliminate the IB program. And there are 3 schools identified with the IB programs: East High, Robinson Middle School, and Gordon Parks Elementary. This one is on the list because we hear comments and questions about, well, how much does your IB program cost? What are you putting into this? Why, you can save money by not having that IB program. But part of the analysis here is really informational, and as we dig into this and look at this to really be able to determine, part of it is cost, part of it is the value of the program, and again the consequence for students, and this is one that we have. We'll get more information to you. We have a lot of students involved in the IB program, and what happens to those students? Well, they still have to take classes. They still have to go someplace. We still have to have teachers. We still have to have the classes for them. So we'll dig into this one a little bit more so that we can answer those questions or any other questions that you might have with regard to this program.
We'll have some kind of idea, and I will go to specifically East High, where when we find out about the great scholarships that our students are receiving, that piece of information will be included as well, some of the
Yes.
larger scholarships, and if they are a part of that program.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any way that we'll be connecting, as an example, IB student coming from Robinson going into the IB program at East, that kind of connective link?
Could you explain that a little more?
Well, as an example, you're seeing benefits of our high school IB program, and I'm wondering, is there a connective link coming from IB program in Robinson? Do they go to the IB program in East, or do they just go into other classes? And you don't have to answer that now if you don't have it. I just think that when we are evaluating middle school and elementary, it would be good to see if there's some kind of link that takes them through high school, and where we actually measure how successful that is when we look at the significant number of scholarship dollars that those students are receiving. And if we could get something along that line.
We have that data, whether Robinson is a pipeline that is successfully preparing students for the IB program at East High School. And from all of our middle schools, Mr. Shook and Mr. Thiessen do a really good job of tracking that data, origin of students, and then their success in the program.
So I'm just asking, if we can get that information provided as well. Okay, thank you.
Number 38 is to reduce or eliminate the AVID program. We currently spend about $1.3 million in this program right now. There's 3 FTE currently being paid there. Most of the budget is spent on professional development, and here's one where we spend some money on travel, and we could eliminate the whole program, but I would guess that we'll get some. We'll find out some of the student consequences of that might want us just to reduce it to some extent. But again, we'll bring you more information about number of students involved and that sort of thing.
That's what I was going to ask, is how many schools do we have AVID in? Are they all of our high schools for AVID? And all of our middle schools now? All but 2. And then how many grade schools? How many? 20. Okay.
Number 39, eliminate the parents as teachers program. This is one that comes to us every once in a while. However, we do not spend very much general fund money on this program at all. It's all funded through a state grant and outside private grants. The savings here would be just on indirect costs for facilities or payroll, HR, accounts payable, budgeting, those types of things, where we provide them services that are paid for out of general funds. But as far as direct support to the program, we currently don't put any general fund money in them.
That was one of those tough decisions a number of years back with budget cuts, was to reduce the services provided strictly on what grant dollars and other funding provided, and to eliminate general fund support.
And number 40 is to reduce or eliminate the JROTC program. This is a program that is also funded by the federal government, by the military. 29% of the revenue that supports this comes through that venue. The total budget for the program is $1.67 million. But again, this is one where these are students in classes that if we didn't have the program, they'd have to be someplace else, and the consequence for not having it at the student level, we'll get some data on that as well.
And this is another one that I'd add to the list that I find heartbreaking, because serving on the board, their board, and interviewing the students, so many of the students have They come in and they give us information about themselves, and they've gone from a minimal GPA to honor roll students. I listen to the great progress that these students have made academically, being a part of that, the attitude of learning to serve the country, the civic-minded thing. And I think that I've been more amazed at the success of the students, how their focus has shifted from other areas to completing their education, going on, and high school suddenly taking on a meaning for them. So this is a sad one for me as well.
And I think it's one of the reasons why we're trying to make sure that we identify all of those consequences, so that when it does come time down to make the terrible decisions that we're going to have to make, that we have the interest of the students in mind.
Yeah.
The last one in this category is to change the high school block schedule to excuse me, to a traditional schedule. Got choked up on this one. Currently, East High School is on a traditional schedule because of the IB program that's there. All the rest of the comprehensive high schools are on a block schedule. And I think we've been down this path also, but we will do some more analysis with regard to looking at schedules and the cost difference. Typically, a block schedule is thought to be more expensive on the teacher side because you have more teachers providing the education in this type of a schedule. But we'll do analysis on that and see if that really is the case, to see what might, if we can tweak it and make it become more in line with what the cost factor in a traditional schedule might be.
We've been talking about the cost of FTE. Mm-hmm. You know, average teacher salary of $60,000, $40,000. What's the additional cost for each teacher for benefits, health insurance, dental insurance, retirement? Where would we be on that also as a savings? And honestly, I don't want to cut teachers, but you know, that's got to be another additional cost for us, so we're not looking out here right now.
Well, it varies a little bit depending on the classification of the employee, but it generally runs 15 to 18%
of their current salary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess one thing before we get into the final one on closings, school closings, I guess I'd like to say, you know, just to our public as well, that you know we know these are all terrible options, and if we do any number of them, it will mean we'll have fewer students, fewer families coming to Wichita, wanting to be here in Wichita. Every school district in the state is going through this. I think everyone needs to understand that. If they don't look at these cuts this year, they will be soon with the trajectory that we're on. So I think it's really important for people to realize that, you know, we're going to have to pick and choose which are the least painful, but there's going to be an element of pain and a cost because of what we're choosing to do as a state. So so I think it's important for people to have input and provide us their feedback. But, you know, just like a person's family's income, you know, when costs go up, you've got to cut somewhere. And without any additional income, that's what we're facing. We've got to look at these things. So as painful as it is, it's what we're going to have to do. So.
The next section deals with school closing options. And the first few of them deal with our what I term our alternative program. But the first option, number 51, is to consolidate all of the metro schools to Chester I. Lewis. And we're currently looking at the staffing needs. If we were to move all of those students there, we would potentially would save some staff costs, and we'd probably save some utility savings from the buildings, the schools that we'd be moving out of. Gateway is a very similar one in regard of moving out of the building, that we would save some utility and issues there because the building is so old and security and everything in that building is so difficult. But we would move Gateway to another location and probably reorganize the program so that we might be able to get some additional special ed funding out of the program. Restructure it a little bit, put some special ed qualified teachers over there to be able to gain some special ed state aid with regard to that. Number 53 is to close the transitional school program, which really is, there's not a lot going through that program right now. This program was originally in place to be the transition from students coming out of the ranch and coming back into our school system. They would come from the ranch, the traditional school, and then into our regular buildings. So the services provided in the transition school would be absorbed into some of our other facilities.
This also serves students coming out of JDF.
JDF, yes.
Yep. Since the ranch is closed, it's those students transitioning out of JDF.
Just to make it perfectly clear, we're not talking, I mean, this is really the JDF kids, what used to be the ranch kids, and it's housed at Lewis. It's not our traditional programs that are our magnet programs at elementary.
Correct.
I don't want that to become confused because of the name.
Yeah. And really, it's just as we move all of those programs together, the transition school part of that just becomes absorbed into that whole program. And again, it comes back to some staffing issues and how we staff those.
And there's also some staffing provided through the county, so it would impact them as well.
Number 54 is outsourcing the educational services at the juvenile detention facility, at the jail. Currently, we staff the facility, and we have to staff the facility on a yearly basis based on what we anticipate will come through there. But we don't always have the number of students at any given particular time. And the funding for this program is actually above and beyond the block grant. But even given that, the funding does not pay for the amount of money that we put into the program, mostly because of how we have to staff it. If we outsourced, for instance, used South Central Kansas Educational Service Center, who does some of our other outsourcing, they have a lot more flexibility of staff, so that when they had a number of students there, they could put more staff there. When they had fewer students, they wouldn't have to have the staff there all the time. So they would gain some efficiencies. They are currently looking at the possibility of whether they could manage it just within the funding that the state would provide and the way that works. So, and at the jail, they take attendance 3 times a year. Whatever the highest attendance is on whatever day that is, then we get that number of students times twice the base state aid per pupil. So it sounds good, but last year I think we subsidized the program by about $400,000. And number 55 is to consider closing smaller elementary schools. This is one that it's probably a fiscal year 18 consideration for you. To do this really requires quite a bit more analysis and perhaps a demographic study to really determine whether that is even feasible or not. There are a lot of indications that, there's a lot of data out there that talks about the small elementary school not being as financially efficient at delivering education as a larger one, but at the same time there are other other factors that come into play with that as well. So this is one that probably needs to be considered for the future, and hence the reason for putting it out there right now.
Mr. Freeman is correct. Most likely, as we take a look at this, we need to look at the district as a whole, and we've been 5 years now with our demographic study, and it will probably due for a refresh of that to give us a better idea on whether those projections held, how well they've held. We knew that there was more fluid aspect to that at the time we did it because of the recession and the impact that was having on families moving and that aspect. But if not this year, then next year we probably need to look at getting that refreshed.
But if we move, close some of these smaller schools, we don't necessarily save a great deal because we still have to educate the students. And in many cases, we don't have other buildings that are large enough because, again, with the state funding cuts for capital outlay, we did not add all the classrooms in many of our buildings that we wanted to do that in. So it's going to be a little tougher than even the last time to do that adequately as well, I think. So.
My question.
As we know, this one takes a lot of study.
And this is a lot to digest. There are some areas that we really need this completed, and I was thinking on the section that you have consequences for students. I'd love to see that include even consequences for staff as well when you bring that back. Because that's an important factor. And I'd like to get an idea of about how long this would take for the chart to be completed. Also, an idea, because I think the board would like to see recommendations, but also be able to look at this and see where the savings are. So there still is quite a bit of work to do, but from a time framework, do we have any idea when this information would be available for the board to review again?
I would better be able to answer that question at the end of this week.
Okay.
Now that our building leadership is aware of the list and these items, Dr. Thompson, Mr. Faflick will be meeting with them so we can look at not only consequences, but a number of these we're going to have to rely on, like middle school principals looking and saying, okay, if I had to do my master schedule given the number of sections with an average class size of 1 to 26 or whatever that might be, I'll need X teachers. They're going to have to do some of that analysis. So once they've had the opportunity to meet and discuss with them, we'll have a better idea. A number of these are in progress, so we'll be able to turn around that more quickly. Those that we need to rely on the building analysis to help us as we go through that on master schedules, and that aspect will take a little longer. But if you get me through the end of the week, and then I'll be able to hopefully have an idea of kind of a calendar for you on how long it'll take for each of the items.
I also think that the board would need an opportunity to look at what kind of venue you would like this information when we do come back together. If we set up another committee of the whole meeting, or if you're wanting to do this at a regular board meeting. So that's something that we as a board need to start thinking about, and that way we'd be able to give you an idea of how we'd like to have this presented to us. So, anything further, board members?
I'm guessing this will also generate discussion in the community, in particular maybe additional ideas. I know we've asked staff to respond to you with ideas if the general public, well, if we get those suggestions, do you want us just to forward those to you, John?
Please.
And then again, you can study those and look at what those are. So.
And that brings up a good point. We've had about 400 responses online with staff to suggestions. There is Mr. Freeman's going to lead a group through beginning the sorting and analysis of those. So we'll have an idea. Many of them are very similar to what we have tonight, and there are others. So we can look at which ones merit further study. I think I've given the example, one of the suggestions I know was made that just eliminate lunch and breakfast program and every student needs to bring their own sack lunch. That won't work for our students. We need to be able to provide the meal structure. So some of them, while good ideas, may just not be doable. So we'll work through that. And again, we'll have a better idea later this week on being able to get you that listing of what's been suggested, and we are working through those. And that's why Mr. Freeman said your list will definitely grow once we begin to get building leadership input and our staff input put together.
And Cheryl has a comment, but Cheryl, let me kind of finish on this vein and then we'll go to you, because I've already started receiving letters. And the thing that I find so distressing is many of the parents, staff, feel as though this is just a decision that the Board of Education has decided to make and not have that connection with, we're not doing this because we have nothing better to do. We are doing this essentially trying to keep some semblance of public education going. And they don't see the connection, excuse me, with how we have been funded as the problem. So that, again, is a topic that we're going to have to continue to deal with so that people understand that we're not just doing this for that sake. Cheryl, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just have a question. Are we putting this for the public, our parents and the rest of the public? Is there somewhere on our web that they can provide these comments to us? Maybe in categories?
I'll let Ms. Johnson respond.
Yeah, now that we know what the categories are, can it go up in some kind of a categorical way where we can begin to get some feedback?
We'll include the full video from your discussion tonight so people can review it if they wish. It'll take probably till Wednesday for us to get that online. We'll have all of the information that you all received tonight available. We'll have an opportunity for people to submit suggestions, Lynn, to your question about how people can respond, so we can collect it all in a consistent manner. And then we'll also have an opportunity, if people have questions, that they can submit questions, and we'll work to get answers for those questions.
Good. Yeah, because some way we have to allow our public, and I know we're wanting to do that, but giving them an easy way to give feedback to us, and in some kind of a way that's not 5,000 responses, but we get some kinds of summaries or something like that. I want to thank you, Jim, and your staff, because I know the hours and hours of work that it's taken to put this together, and none of us are happy. I'm walking away with my stomach in a knot tonight, because this is not where I want to be for this district, because we've worked so hard to be able to provide the quality education that we do for our students. And we all know any cut on this list hurts that. So, thank you. Okay.
Okay. Mike?
Jim, I'd also like to thank you for your time and effort and all the staff. I mean, it's one of the more interesting things I've sat through in a long time. I would like to make kind of a statement. I know it's not what everybody wants to hear, but I'm a small business owner, and I'm a recipient of these tax breaks. And I'm willing to challenge the rest of the small business owners out there to talk to the governor and say enough's enough. I'll pay my taxes. I would prefer to pay my taxes and keep Kansas great. Because I don't want to sit here as somebody that's receiving the benefits and yet cutting. So I want people to know that I'm willing to put that on the line and challenge the other business owners to jump up and join in on this. I know Representative Hutton is working on a tax plan that's just that very thing, and he's getting beat up pretty bad for it. But I think it's time that Kansas wakes up and says, don't benefit, take the small benefits away, and let's get our kids educated, because I know I need a workforce in the next couple of years, and if they're not educated, they're no good to me. And I appreciate you letting me say that. Thank you.
Glenn?
I guess two things I did want to ask a question on. Both came up in terms of meetings that occurred with the legislature. One was at the delegation meeting in Andover on Saturday, and one of the legislators said that private schools pay for special ed services. I just wanted to confirm that we pay for that out of our budget in almost every instance that I'm aware of, if those children are located in 259. Is that correct? And
parochial schools, we have a federal proportionate share that we spend, but in Kansas, as Tom could elaborate, we have a little higher standards, so we do spend more than just the federal proportionate share.
Okay. And then the second item was one of the senators from Johnson County was complaining about the equity issue, and that we spend twice as much on our health care costs as Johnson County does. I guess, John, I'd like you to address that, because I know in the A&M study they double counted, and that was part of the problem. I don't know where Senator Denning was getting his information, but I just want to be clear. Are we spending double what Johnson County is spending?
No. We're not sure where Mr. Denning got his information either. Our expenditure for annual value on our plan is about $10,500. Now, the piece you have to think about when you look at what district contributions, what that number looks like, looking at several of the Johnson County schools over the last couple of years, we may be in the range of $60 to $100 more per employee. But at the same time, our employees have made a decision that they want to maintain that health care and have asked that those dollars be maintained there versus salary. I mean, those have been some of the things we've negotiated. So when you look at a salary comparison, it's not always apples to apples in that aspect. But yeah, some of the claims saying that over $20,000 an employee and those types of things are just I don't know where they've come up with that information, but ours is about $10,500, and when you look at the cost per employee in the district contribution, we're fairly comparable.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further comments, John, did you have any final thing?
Just very quickly, as we started the meeting, I want to remind everybody, our budget discussions and our targets are a snapshot in time. As we progress and as the budget year closes out, Mr. Freeman's able to get a more definitive idea of where we'll end the budget year and how that might impact our next budget. But again, what's going to go on the remainder of this week, potentially in Topeka, could have a significant impact to our budget. As you think the hearing tomorrow on Common Core and standards, you look at how the equity bills might be applied. You look at bills that would require us to provide at least 1 hour of various trainings to staff, whether it's CPR or suicide prevention, those types of things. Again, those aren't bad initiatives or requirements, but there comes a cost tied to those. So our budget issue may change as we get to the end of this month and they look at consensus revenue coming up in April, and we hope that March sales tax is not similar to February's. Then we may have to be talking differently as things progress there. So again, we're getting late in the year. We're talking budget. We're talking about positions, and we still don't have a clear idea of what that that ending hole we need to fill is at this point in time. So keep reminding folks about that when we put a number out, it's our best guess at this point, and there's still a lot to be determined that's out of our control.
The board is clearly appreciative of your work, Mr. Freeman, as well as the rest of the staff. We thank you. I was sitting here thinking, sometimes someone will ask you, what keeps you up at night? There was a time I had a list. I have a dissertation now. So, okay, with nothing else that we need to do, thank you all. Have a good evening.